We'll go ahead and call the workshop to order. This is the workshop to discuss draft CP 16-01, application for comprehensive plan text amendment regarding amendments to the coastal management element related to flooding. And I originally asked you guys to do a workshop on this, so I'd like to just start out by, first of all, just thanking Summer on this, and I told her this in our pre-meeting. Summer did a great job making the best of what I believe is a bad ordinance. And let me correct, most of the ordinance is good. It's just that one little part that I had heartburn with. I met with the state on Friday. I think I sent that out to everyone, so I know everyone has at least had an opportunity to see that. So, you know, you guys just tell me how you like to go for there. If we want to give a rundown of that meeting or any questions about that, or...
My understanding, Ralph, the gist is that they're going to revise it, basically.
Absolutely. They're going to propose that to the senator that sponsored that legislation, and see if they can bring that back and have it amended in this year in a upcoming session.
So we really don't need to do anything at this point, right?
In my opinion, we do not. We have until May of 2017 to start the year process, and then that all has to be finalized by May of 2018. So I believe if we get this changed through the session this coming year and we have something that we can adopt, then we can meet that deadline as well.
Would there be any way we could send a letter or maybe even a resolution from the county to them expressing our support for them to do the revision?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. And I plan to do that, but I didn't draft it prior to this meeting, but I could...
I think it'd be a good, solid thing we could send them, that we as a commission, you know, support them revisions.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, in my meeting on Friday, I did tell them that I was going to submit proposed language, so that would be real good if I could bring that language back to the board, and if we all either agree or help work that out so we can find something that we're comfortable with. The Department of Economic Opportunity, from the department head that manages this area and all of his different specialty areas that were there represented, they made it very clear that they see this as a problem, and they think this is going to be a problem in all 67 all coastal counties, which I think is 37 coastal counties. But they acknowledge that we're just the first ones to find it. But
they're going to have to fix and change it at their level.
Absolutely.
I support the do nothing can.
I'd like Commissioner Chairman to explain the area of heartburn.
Absolutely. Be glad to. The main, the main area was paragraph 2F2, and I'll read that word for word. Encourage the use of best practices, development and redevelopment principles, strategies, and engineering solutions that will result in the removal of coastal real property from flood zone designations established by FEMA. So the first problem is there is no definition of coastal real property. It doesn't exist in the state of Florida, doesn't exist in the federal government. When I first wrote this, I thought, well, maybe it does exist, and I just don't know where it's at. I haven't found it. But we had the flood manager for the entire state of Florida, Mr. Steve Martin with the Department of Emergency Management. He was there. Several people from the Department of Economic Opportunity, one person representing the Senate, and everyone was in agreement that there is no definition of that. So that's the first problem. If you can't define it, how do you regulate it? How do you tell someone, we don't know exactly what it is, but we know that you are or you are not in compliance with it?
So what is the 192.001 parent 12? What is that definition?
No, that only defines real property. That doesn't define coastal real property. I pulled that into the equation to make the point that the state of Florida does define real property, and real property includes not only structures to the property, but the dirt itself. So if we have a policy that says that we're going to remove real property, whether it be coastal real property or any real property, effectively what we're saying is we're going to remove the dirt also.
So what you're saying, Ralph, is the definition says, say you're in Panacea and you're on Joe Mac Smith or whatever. Right. Is that coastal real property, or you have to be contiguous to the ocean?
Well, the closest I got Friday was one of the attorneys that was there representing the Senate. She told me that, she says, I don't know for certain what it meant, but she thought what it meant was any property that's located in a coastal county would be considered coastal real property. So Bob Miller Road would be considered coastal real property.
I think that's bizarre.
I do too.
And I think that's sort of a worthless statement of whoever said that. You know, I think that people have been using the term real property to mean pretty much what you have there. I'm unaware of it having the meaning of land, and I think it's obvious what the to me it's obvious what the intent was to make sure that any property that you're putting on this land is going to be above, minus the pilings, is going to be above the flood levels.
Correct.
And so that's, you know, whether it's gas cans or, you know, storing wood or whatever you want, chairs, or, you know, come that storm, that stuff has to be up and out of the way. So, and best management practices, I'm not sure that I see a real problem of where we're going with this.
Okay, well, let's take the next. Let's set that aside for a minute. Let's say if we did have a definition of coastal real property, we knew what that meant, and we were all okay with that. Okay. Let's take the next part of that sentence. It says removal of coastal real property from flood zone designations. Now,
Loma's the only thing that's going to do that.
Well, even that's not going to remove it. It's still going to have a flood zone designation. It may improve the designation.
Right.
It may make it in an inferior or less inferior designation.
Still a flood zone designation.
Still a designation. So that was my point, too, that if you're in Zone X or if you're in Zone C, you're at the absolute minimum risk of flooding, but you are still in a flood zone designation. So if we adopt an element that says that's our goal, is to remove property from the flood zone designation, that means that we have to make an earnest attempt for every property that meets that definition, whatever that definition turns out to be. Every property we would have to attempt to remove it from a flood zone designation, which you can never physically do. You can remove it from an X to a C or an A or vice versa one way, but it's going to, in Wakulla County, 100% of the parcels are in a flood zone designation of one or the other.
But is that a 100-year flood zone designation?
Is this, but is this the intent or the meaning? Are we not talking about the ability to try to protect harm to, you know, the homes and structures, the existing structures? I thought this was geared to, at least in our resolution, to be moving forward on the new building, new construction, remodeling, not to go in and say, well, your house is too low, now you have to raise it. I don't think that was the intent here.
Well, if you read that first sentence, it best practices development and redevelopment. So it would apply to both. It would apply to new construction or to renovations.
Right, and I think part of that we're already existing in that system where we have FEMA rules that if you use up that 50% of your depreciated home value, you're not going to be able to remodel your house.
Right. And
so that thing stops there, and that's basically getting rid of that structure. For me, it's if you wanted to, and it's a real issue. The issue is dealing with, you're the mortgage, you're expert. It's dealing with mortgages over here. As an individual, I feel like I should have the right to build 100% of the depreciation value of my house, and I should suffer the consequences for not getting being able to get a mortgage. Mm-hmm. But this is not where this is going to. This is going to really safety and the ability to have a mortgage issued that's going to be sustainable into the future, because they're looking at, what is it, 30% chance that this is going to flood within the lifetime of your, or whatever the percentage is, 26%, with the lifetime of the mortgage. It's a significant percentage that this is going to happen,
I mean,
or 100%.
Existing FEMA regulations cover everything Howard's talking about.
And
if you build a new house, Howard's right about the 50% rule. You can't spend more than 50% of the value of your home on improvements. And if you build a new one, it's got to be above base flood elevation. So that's already covered. This is more towards what they want us to put in our comp plan, I guess. And I agree, the language is pretty sketchy. It seems like somebody had a idea of what they wanted to do, but didn't know how to actually,
the intent is
this
good.
in the wrong way. They didn't know what they were talking about.
The intent is good, and there was a gentleman there from the Florida Wildlife Federation that he helped write this language.
Jay Lyles.
Exactly. And so he sat right next to me. I think we finally came to the conclusion that he and I were on the exact same page as far as the intent of this and the need for this. And so I wanted to make sure he understood that I was not fighting him in that regard. This needs to be done. It's just the execution was bad. It's like we're trying to shoot a target, but we shot our neighbor instead. And that's what's happened here, is we're dragging our neighbors into a problem. If we adopt this, Howard, let me give you an example. Let's say you and I live down on the coast, and I live on the seaward side, and I'm in flood zone A. You live directly across the street from me, but because of the elevation, you're in flood zone X. You're 50 feet from me, but you're in flood zone X, so you're not required to carry flood insurance. This, as it's written, would apply to you also, because it specifies properties that are in a flood zone designation. And so the intent is to minimize the risk and to reduce the payouts to FEMA. That all makes sense. We should all agree that we want to try to hit that. But what this now specifies is it applies to your property as well as mine, even though you're not in a high-risk category that requires flood insurance. So you may not have a mortgage on your property, you may not have flood insurance or ever intend to have flood insurance and not required to, even if you have a mortgage. But if we adopt this language, it states that we're going to apply this toward properties that have a flood zone designation, which will include C and X, which are in the very minimal risk of flooding.
So what is this, in your opinion, if we went ahead and said, okay, I've read everything, looks like this is pretty good, let's vote on it, and we say we approve it. What does this document that's being proposed make us do, actually make us do, right now? How does it change things?
Well, it makes us change our comp plan.
Well, that's a piece of paper.
And if we follow what the statute says, it makes us put something in our comp plan that none of the five of us nor the state can define, and makes us try to figure out how we're going to apply that to people without the ability of defining it.
So, issue of real property,
coastal real property.
Is there a distinction between coastal real property and real property?
I mean, at this point, without a definition in statute, all you can do is make an argument as to what it means. And that argument is up for interpretation, and ultimately, if it became a controversy, it would be an interpretation done by a court as to whether it's property sitting on the water, property in a coastal county. There's not a lot to go on in the
It could be property within 10 miles of the coast, for all we know.
Yeah, we don't know what it means.
We could define it. I asked the state that very question. I said, since no one's defined it, I said, if I'm required to do this and I have to put this in there, if we define it as a board and we agree to it, of course, we're the first one to make the definition, so we're not in violation of anything. If we say that it's 12 inches above the mean high water flood line,
1 foot from the coast.
1 foot, and you can't build in that 1 foot. I said, now that's silly, and now we've kind of negated the whole intended consequence of this statute, but that would be legal. But that'd be silly.
Would we be able to, if we sent the resolution up there, would we be able to hold off on action here until we find out from what their response is, or do we have a timeline where we have to act one way or the other?
We've got until May 1st of 2017 to start that EAR process, and May 1st of 2018 to complete it. And so I guess Summer May can give us a little information of that, but I believe by May 1st of 2017 we have to have a plan of how we intend to adopt this if it's not
Everybody's
changed.
got to do it. Every coastal county has to do it. Why don't we let somebody else be the guinea pig instead of us?
That's my thing.
Putting test language out there, and you know what I mean? There's no rush. We've got 2 years. So, again, I'm in the do-nothing camp. I don't think there's any, like Howard said, I really don't think there's any harm in doing it, but there's certainly no harm in not doing it either.
Right. Exactly.
All right, good meeting.
Well, we got a couple citizens.
When you say not doing it, you mean wait until we do our ears?
Yes.
Okay.
Or wait, let another county try it out, and you know, let them let the state flesh out all these issues, which I'm sure they're going to, and then maybe they'll come up with a definition for coastal.
Just so you know, I mean, they're going to start drafting EAR stuff now to bring it back to you so that they can meet the 2017 submittal requirement to the state. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to submit that without putting something in there on this issue. So you do have some time, but we don't have.
That means we only have a year then.
Yeah.
I think Summer can handle it within a year, right, Summer?
And we should know, I would think,
the item's already done, right?
and we should know within the next couple of months if this senator is going to pick it up and make an amendment. And if he doesn't, then, you know, I had the Florida Association of Counties at this meeting with me, and so my goal is if this thing flounders, we're going to make it try to make it a legislative priority. If this senator proposes this and it makes sense, we're going to try to get everybody behind him and say, yep, this makes sense. Jim Carlton.
My question is, how did this get put on the consent agenda, something that's this important to the county, without the people being notified?
Well, let me answer that, or you guys want to answer?
Go ahead.
That's not non-typical. It's normal that they'll have something like that, and they'll schedule it. It'll be on the consent agenda. That's the first time that it's made public.
That was on the consent was to advertise.
Advertise it.
Advertise.
Come back.
Okay, that's
Not
what
to
I...
pass it, just simply to advertise we're going to be
Okay.
talking about this.
That's fine.
And at first glance, it didn't look like it would be anything controversial. I mean, generally, when the state says, we passed a statute, the governor signed it, you have to do it, then you have to do it. Howard even asked me that question at the last meeting. How can we not do it? So generally, we have to do it, but in this case, we at least have a little bit of time where we can, let's try to get it right before we do it.
Well, my hat's off to you for looking this over and questioning the state instead of just taking it as it is. So that's a good job, man.
Thank you. Dallas Marshall.
First of all, let me say I think Summer did a good job on this. It could have been worse because there's some language in there that could have been included that would have made it worse, and I think that you did a good job. So my criticism is not for how it was brought forward. I'm a what, why, when, and where kind of person. So when some comprehensive plan changes come up, I like to look into it and see where it's taking us. And so everybody understands the Comprehensive Planning Act and FEMA insurance claims, and they're trying to get citizens off and private insurance involved, and that's what's driving this whole thing, and that's great. Why we're doing it is because it's mandated by the Comprehensive Planning Act, and for us to have any zoning change or anything in the county, we got to do it. So I understand that. And where? Well, it's 35 coastal counties that have to do this, and so that answers that. But when, there's a little controversy there, and it reminds me of a church a few months back. The preacher was preaching, and he would stop and say, everybody wants to go to heaven, raise your hand. And everybody raised their hand and says, hallelujah, hallelujah. One guy in the back of the room says, look, and the preacher starts talking and says, raise your hand and say hallelujah. Brother John didn't raise his hand. So we asked Brother John, why don't you raise your hand and say hallelujah? Don't you want to go to heaven? He said, yeah. I'm not ready to go right now. So why do we need to do something right now that it won't hurt a thing in the world to put off until the Senate addresses the problem? And that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the citizens. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. There's some merit in taking some action, especially when the action that could take really doesn't, in my opinion, jeopardize the county to any extent. If you don't have to be the last on the block to do something, you don't have to be the first on the block to do something, but when we're looking at best management practices, I think it's hard to drag your feet on something like that. So I don't think we have to wait an extended period of time to do what we need to do and basically have to do by our requirements. I mean, we can wait to the ultimate thing and turn it in, 5 minutes before the hour, but why do that?
I don't think anybody's suggesting we do that, but we would like a couple of questions answered, which should probably answer in the next few months, hopefully. Some clarification.
Well, and
And I don't want to do this again. We don't want to come back and somebody says, well, this is what we really meant, and then we did a whole comp plan amendment based on what we thought they meant.
Right.
And then we got to go waste money and doing it all over again.
And I also want to echo one of the citizens' remarks and some of the board's remarks about Summer's work on this has been excellent.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good job, Summers. I support Summer.
Well, thank you. And just to clarify, I will say that Melissa had a huge hand in this and did
Support
most of the
Melissa,
heavy
too.
lifting, so.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Melissa looks like she was ducking back there, but yeah.
All right, any further discussion? Staff, anyone? Stand adjourned till 5 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out.